Okay. Hello, today we are here to interview Lionel Carter, professor at Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. He is the SEPM's 2020 winner of the Francis P. Shepard Medal for Excellence in Marine Geology. My name is Kayla Irizarry. I am a master's student here at Penn State University, or rather PhD student now. I just graduated with my master's. And I'm studying paleontology and sedimentology with a little bit of geochemistry added in there just for fun. And so we'll start this interview off with the first question. So this is kind of a big question, Lionel, so I hope you're ready. In 5 minutes or less, can you summarize your path to the geosciences?
My path as a geoscientist, that's an interesting one because I never started out deliberately to be a geoscientist. It was purely by chance. I had gone through in chemistry, but I had a unit to spare. So I picked up the first year in geosciences, and it just blew me away because what we were shown in the class, I could replicate outside in the real world. And that real world for me is Auckland in New Zealand. And Auckland is built on the basaltic volcanic system. And I could go out, I could see calderas, I could see flows, I could see a whole range of stuff. And from then on, the rest is history. I graduated from Auckland, and then one thing which I would encourage, I went to Canada with my dear wife and went to the University of British Columbia and started a whole new system. Again, everything was landscapes. In Canada, you could go to these, ice-scoured valleys, and again, you were sort of just captured by the landscape. Then I took the plunge, no pun intended, but I went into oceanography. And again, I never looked back, and that was just one of those things. From oceanography, I went to work for industry, a petroleum company, which in those days wasn't such a pariah. And then quite by chance, a job came up at the New Zealand Oceanographic Institute. I remember quite clearly that I posted my thesis off to the Institute in New Zealand, and it cost me 31 Canadian dollars, which in those days probably equates to, I don't know, 70 or 80 US, even more. And anyway, I got the job. I went back to New Zealand, and I was introduced. They said, you have a mailbox here for you, and in the mailbox was my thesis. And the stamps had been ripped off. And I learned that the director was an avid stamp collector. And so the rumor has gone around that I bought myself into this job. But that's the way it's been. And since returning to New Zealand, I've had a domestic and international career, which I've enjoyed and continue to enjoy very much.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was a lot in 5 minutes. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really, I think I had the same when I was able to go out and actually see what was being taught to me in real life. It absolutely blew my mind. And I mean, I was like 21 years old. I had never heard the word geology in my life. So, all right. So I'm going to move on to the second question. What are you most proud of in your career?
Again, I'll try and be brief. With the award of the Shepard's Medal, that has been a real highlight. It was totally, I knew of the medal, but I didn't know I'd been nominated. And when I was nominated and got it, in retrospect, that really was a highlight. I'm the second New Zealander to win the Shepard Medal, but I'm in a really high quality group of previous winners. And sometimes I think I've been incredibly lucky. I'm very lucky to have been in New Zealand because it's a country a bit like the US with the east and west coasts merged into one. But it's a country, and I don't want to sound into going into a lesson. I get carried away sometimes, but it is a land of really big signals. It straddles an active plate boundary. It sits immediately between the subtropics and the subantarctic. And so I was so lucky to be in this sort of setting that the science would flow, because it was all pioneering science. So that work culminated, and as I mentioned before, I continue to do that sort of stuff. And so with the medal coming my way, I was exceptionally proud to sort of see that with some measure of my achievements, some modest achievements, may I add. Okay.
Well, I think it's always nice to be acknowledged by your community. You feel seen, and yeah. So, have you encountered any challenges or setbacks that turned out to be really valuable experiences to you during your time as a geoscientist?
Yep. I get seasick. And
Really?
so,
Oh man.
and so
That's ironic.
I haven't had many radio interviews, but when they do happen, they say, today we have the seasick oceanographer on. So that was, sounds silly now, but it was a real challenge. Fortunately, I found a pharmacy in northernmost New Zealand who made these seasick pills, which actually worked. So I was able to go to a career which I spent about 3 years at sea,
Wow.
relatively comfortably. What else has there been? One thing that I've really taken a lot of notice is working with industry. And that's, to me, a major challenge, not being in a derogatory sort of way that we're dealing with two different cultures. We still see that operating today. It's almost like a cartoon. The scientists, they got to have a lab coat on, they've got to have a test tube in their hands, whereas the people from industry, they've got to have smart suits and sit in flash restaurants. So when it comes down to the real basics, both sides are human, and making contact with industry, working with them, has been very fruitful. We'll talk about that a little bit later on.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I feel like when my colleagues go away to industry as a young academic, I think, okay, I'll never see you again. Like, goodbye. So I think there's definitely that divide is still there, at least mentally. Um, okay, so if you could go back in time, is there anything that you would have done differently in your career?
To be honest, a lot. But one thing which I do regret now more than anything else is not becoming terribly mathematically literate. It's been a key thing, because what has happened now is that we're awash with data. You have satellites passing over, mapping the entire surface of the Earth every 2 or 3 days at least. So probably one of my main regrets is that I didn't follow through. I did a first year in maths and I enjoyed it, but I let it slip. That was a mistake. And so today, for anybody coming through, they really have to be literate in mathematics.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I feel like there's always this tension between wanting to go and stick my head in a statistics book and then also like really understand the concepts that I'm wanting to deal with in the first place. And there's just never enough time to do both, but I'm sure the balance exists somewhere. So, do you have any advice for young professionals in the beginning of their careers?
That's a tricky one, because I hate imposing things on what is basically quite a fluid situation. When you could go to university for 3 years and still not know what you really want to do. So a lot of geologists happen, as we mentioned before, happens by chance. What I would suggest, is while you're in your later years of your degree, just keep an eye out for what is going on. I'm not sure whether industry company representatives come on campus here at Penn State.
Yes.
come on campus. Just think about it. I found my experience with industry was interesting. I had 2 years with an oil company, and there's nothing I hated about it, but it just wasn't me. And I was glad to get back to science, but I did enjoy the experience, and that's worth thinking about. You can still keep your options open. And what I'm saying now is try to be a generalist most of the time so that you've got more options than somebody who specializes in numerical modeling, for example. And then just be aware of what's available. Coming out of your undergraduate year, you must have, maybe have financial issues or whatever, and you may need to go to a industry thing for 2 years. Look at it as something that you gain. It is a fascinating world, without doubt. There's some fantastic people there, but it's just not me.
Right. But you were able to find that out through that experience, and I think that's really important. Like you said, there's this dichotomy, like you're either an academic when you're in graduate school or you're trying to be in industry, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Um, so I would say, do you have any advice specifically toward your, like targeted towards graduate students that are towards the end of their PhDs that are like going to go on to maybe a research focused job?
Yeah, sure. I mean, to say that's part of the whole deal, is trying to get something you like. But all I'm saying is just, you may not get the perfect job the first time, but you've got to fill in time and just think that, well, I'll do a couple of years with industry or even a year just to give me a flavor. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I think this is a question that's on a lot of people's minds nowadays, especially after COVID. How do you manage your time and maintain a work-life balance?
I do my best. And I say that with some smile on my face, because I know it's not easy, but you really do have to take breaks. But for me personally, it was going running at lunchtime. It just sort of,
Mm.
you de-stress, and importantly, your mind clears when you go on to something other than science, or you may want to take another aspect of science. But taking breaks is just critical. I mean, so there's a whole lot of physiological reasons too, because crouching over a computer screen, your body starts to bend over. I start off upright at the start of the day. By the end of the day, my nose is touching the screen.
Yeah.
So you really have to make the effort. But even if you just go walking at lunchtimes, or it doesn't have to be lunchtimes, you go home and do something entirely different. But it's
Hmm.
just a question of breaking out of that habit. Science is 24/7. It just doesn't stop. You have to regulate that to fit your own thing. Sometimes I get quite rude at people who send me, "Can you have this done in the next half hour?" type of job, the rush job. And I
Hmm.
just try and politely say, your rush job is not my rush job.
Hmm.
You just have to be, you can be polite and firm, but it's important, because once you do it, you notice the difference. Just going
Yes.
for a stroll at lunchtime or whatever, it just breaks it up. Your mind clears, and that's the important bit. And I think you're far more efficient regulating breaks than just trying to work through the whole day without a respite.
Mm. Yeah.
I'm not a medical doctor, by the way.
I mean, sometimes you need someone who knows the field, who knows the ground to tell you what to do. But
Yeah,
probably the medical doctor would say, just don't be in the lab for that many hours. But I think you need someone to tell you, if you need to do it, but take a walk every 3 hours, you know?
there will be jobs which are rushed, don't get me wrong, and sometimes you have to
Yes.
bend to meet that thing. But once you've done that, take the break.
Mm. Yes, I like that. Take the break. Just take it. So what skills do you think have helped you be essential at your job? What are some foundational skills that you think benefit all geoscientists, kind of broadly?
I hope you take offense at what I'm about to say, but one of the key things is being able to communicate in writing and, of course, orally. It's absolutely critical. I'm finding, and it may be a New Zealand thing, but the quality of students coming through, their literacy is not great.
Mm-hmm.
And some of my best students have, excuse me, have come from Germany, Argentina, because they've been taught the language late in life, how to punctuate, all these sort of basic things. So communicating clearly in writing and orally is quite critical. I'm sounding like an ultra conservative, but the ability to meet deadline is quite important, because it shows that you're on the ball. And again, there's going to be times when it's flat out, but you've got to take those breaks. But managing your time for jobs is quite important. If you say you're going to write a paper, write a paper. Again, that's all within this big hazy thing of 24/7 work. A couple of other things. I've seemed to have sort of stressed this ability to express oneself, both in, depending what you do. You may have to make a presentation to a company, or you may be presenting a paper at Geological Society of America. Is do it simply, do it. Don't try and cram everything into the presentation. I'm sure all this is well known. It's just having clarity. Clarity is, to me, is quite critical, because when you're talking with industry, they don't know what you're talking about unless you bring it to a level where you're both comfortable. And again, the scientists have to know what the industry people are talking about. What do they need? So again, being agile, being a good writer. One of my best students from the US was an English major, and she wrote a thesis, and it just flowed. It was a story, absolutely brilliant piece of work, but because he had control of language. So yeah, that's a bit nebulous, but communication, written and oral, is quite critical.
Okay, so this is kind of a more abstract question, but I really like it. Do you believe success and fulfillment are interchangeable? Within the context of your experiences, how would you define these words?
That's a hard one. To me, success is an achievement, come what may. You could be successful, but getting to that successful point has been an absolute grind or pain. You haven't enjoyed this thing, and what you've set out to complete, you've completed. Fulfillment, to me, is a much longer goal, and it's much more pleasurable thing. That what we're talking about, the Shepard medal, that's recognition of fulfillment of what I was doing, and it happened quite by accident. I didn't plan, I've got my fulfillment thing to do today. It just happened. And it's probably, maybe in my case, measure of my enjoyment of the whole thing, but you can get success and the cost to body and soul may be just too much. Fulfillment is what you do, you like doing. It comes to some sort of form of completion, but it's been absolutely pleasurable and generally unplanned. You can't start a position at a university, for example, and say, this is going to be my goal in 50 years. A lot happens in 50 years or even 10 years. So cut to the quick, success can be gained at a large cost. Fulfillment is something that happens over long periods, and you feel very satisfied when you get there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I kind of like fulfillment is it kind of sneaks up on you and you're not able to plan it. Whereas success is like you have a plan, you have a start point and an end goal. It's maybe more rigid, whereas fulfillment is like more kind of maybe in the heart rather than like in the to-do list. Is that?
Okay, you've said it better than me.
We worked together on it. We collaborated. Um,
Okay.
let's see. So I really like this question because I think teaching is like one of my favorite parts of geology. So, what creative ways do you transfer knowledge?
Boy, that's really difficult. Probably because I'm not the most digitally literate person, but I work in the Antarctic Research Centre, and
Okay.
immediately you got a big draw card because everybody I've known wants to go to Antarctica. So we've had some big programs down there. Andrill, which was jointly with US and Italy and New Zealand, and what we did was a whole range of things because people obviously can't open up the gates to go to Antarctica for a number of reasons, but we had direct link up with schools in the US, Italy, and New Zealand and others, with people in the field doing their thing. You know, whether they're ice coring or coring through the Ross Ice Shelf into the bed to get a history of the Ross Ice Shelf, we can actually link up in real time. So there's these students, say in New York, talking to somebody at the other side of the world who's actually drilling through the ice shelf into the bedrock. And they found that quite exciting. We get guest visits, which you have to take, bringing people from government down. They all want to go. And having that link, the political link, I'm not very good at politics, but having that political link is important because they are the funders. So they come down, they'll make 2 to 3 days, and then again, they get that feeling about what it's like to be in Antarctica. We have a hut, which unfortunately burnt down, but it was a hut where Sir Edmund Hillary
Mm-hmm.
used to train. And so they'd overnight in there, and you could feel the history coming out of the walls. We've had, because of our situation, the deep sea drilling projects in its various guises had stopped over in Wellington. So again, if you open up the vessel to the public, it's a big deal. They can see a drilling ship. Some can be taken up the rigging. The only issue is, and you alluded to it earlier on, is having time to do these things, and that is really difficult. It's all very well saying, "Oh, we can go out and do these fancy outreach programs." Quite often you can't, simply because of time. It takes.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed some of the papers, geophysical research letters, for example, they're requesting not just the abstract. Well, you've got to do the abstract, but a little public part of the paper which explains what you're doing in simple language.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's a great idea. The next step, though, it doesn't stop there. It's got to be carried through to people who consume that sort of information. Not everybody with GRL, but having these little what does this paper mean sort of things is to me quite important,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the lines one has to follow through. My personal feeling is you've got to do the hard science. That's the gold standard. Then you've got to take that science, translate it into some language which is easily understood by politicians, by the public, and work on that. And if you're well connected or university is well connected, they'll have media people who could take it the next step further.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes time, but if you can do that occasionally, take some interesting science and take it into the public. How many papers have you read on the death of the dinosaurs? It's always in the news. They found another
Yeah.
dinosaur, footprints or whatever. The public just love that stuff, and you have to sort of make that effort. But time waits for nobody.
Yeah. I think that what I really like about this conversation is the theme is like, we're doing science, but it can't be in a vacuum. There has to be a way for it to come out, whether that's to industry or whether that's to people who are maybe interested in this sort of thing. So I really appreciate that. I feel like for me, moving forward, that's how I envision the future of science for my generation of scientists.
Sure, sure.
So kind of playing off the last question, and maybe we already answered this a little bit, but how do you think we can improve and better direct geoscience outreach efforts?
Yeah, well, the, the negative thing is just having the time and the will to do it. But to me, it has to be done. And after this interview, I will sort of start getting something together about the Shepard medal.
Mm-hmm.
For people in New Zealand, it's like taking on the big guys. The US, somebody from New Zealand has won a prize, which is basically a US prize. So there is a wee catch. I'm probably not the best media person, but I know I'm not the best media person, but they could leave that up to somebody else to explain it. So it's a lot easier in New Zealand. Although having said that, science has been on a high for COVID. Never in my life would I thought I'd see the Prime Minister of New Zealand start off a speech according to the latest numerical simulations. And it's way. And so you have to build on that. I think the public is becoming more literate. That's a big call, but I suspect they are, because the scientific aspects, things like what do the statistics mean, are becoming more and more prevalent in the press, depending what press you get. But if you're getting the Washington Post or New York Times, they're pretty slick. So there is hope. Out of the adversity of COVID, science has come to the forefront. And it's been very interesting looking at the stats that a lot of what we think the scientific neat stuff has dropped off Nature and others and been replaced by medical papers. It's been a marked change simply because people are publishing about COVID. What you need for those papers is somebody who can translate that data and talk about it. There's one guy, Christopher Smith, I think his name is, from Cambridge, and he is just fantastic. You understand what he's talking about, and that's the big thing, is getting people to understand. They say, why do you call it global warming when parts of the world are getting quite cold? So that people can, the right people, the right person who can talk about those things clearly are worth their weight in gold.
Right. And I think, it's really isolating for people to try to interact with science when there's so much there that they don't understand, and just makes them want to push it away completely. So
Yeah,
to kind of reach out to them and say, like, hey, like, you can understand this. This is your money funding this too. It's for all of us. I think that's really important.
yeah.
So we'll switch a little bit to talk about geoscience research. So what impact has geoscience research and practice made to ensure human sustainability? And what resources should we capitalize on to reach this sustainability goal?
I guess the thing that's caught us for the last 20, 30 years has been climate change and environmental responses to climate change. And we're all aware it's been a really rocky road to people to accept the science, to understand what the implications are, and hence what the sustainability options are. And it probably has been quite depressing for people that people don't understand the science.
Yeah.
Somebody took me aside and said, you know what, people are not going to twig until there's major catastrophes. And we're starting to see that. The trick is adapting to climate change. The trick is to undertake measures, not to combat, but to adapt to change. And that becomes a political thing. All the scientists can do, the scientists have the answers. The politics is another question. You know, who's going to sort of fund people in the US to buy an electric car? And that's the debate we have right at the moment. For the simple reason, it's the purview of the rich or wealthy people who can afford an electric car. So it's all these sociological things coming together. So again, what the science can produce is the science.
Mm-hmm.
That's your gold standard, always falling back on well-reviewed papers. That's your foundation. You have to leave it to others, or you can guide others through that maze of scientific literature, through the IPCC work. But it is quite important that the data you present is the best quality, or the best stuff we know now, that's the state of our knowledge now. And then again, time dependent, if you can guide people into that sort of maze. I'm going to say, for some scientists, the climate change thing has not been difficult. I have a 1956 Time magazine talking about oceanography, and there's a picture of Roger Revelle when he was the director of scripts. And he'd worked out, he said, oh, well, if we continue burning coal by the change of the millennium, we'll be about 1 to 2 degrees warmer. That was back in 56. You can go back to Victorian times. We knew all this stuff. But the political aspects are important. We have to sort of be aware of them. And my God, it's been pretty tough times for some people. But just say, this is what the science says. If they want to go a bit further, you can again guide the people. And that's happening. Another example is we're doing that for sea level rise. The government just funded us with 13 million to get sea level rise on a scale around New Zealand, because New Zealand, being on a tectonic boundary, just like the Western US, is going up and down. So you have to remove the tectonic aspects. But again, they're producing this stuff, and suddenly people will see, okay, we're going up, it's not a major problem here. Other areas we're stable, so this is what the science says. In other areas, we're sinking, and the rates have changed again. So good science to support what you're saying with the best knowledge you have, and then working through that. With regards to sustainability, you know, what are you going to do about your coastlines, about people living there? All this stuff, which, well, at the moment, as we said here, it's playing out in Florida big time.
Yep.
So you just rant and rave. What don't you understand? So the best we can do is provide the data. That's what I'm saying. And if needed, work through with people. It is happening.
Yeah. So this is another big question, and I think this is on my mind and a lot of students' minds recently. So with challenges in securing job opportunities, why should one consider a career in geoscience today?
Well, at the moment, we do it because we like it. So we have to be a bit smart about turning our like into paid like.
Mhm.
um, on a fairly abstract note, I've found that geologists are in demand. We're next to Australia, close to Australia, so a lot of them go in the mining industry. So
Right.
that's your industry thing, the 1 to 2 to 3 year thing that you do to get another knowledge about
Yeah.
how the system works. Um, in geology's favour, we're used to working with incomplete data sets and making the best of them. We're great interpreters of data, even though the data may be incomplete. Um, and people have been hired on that skill. And you've got to be aware of it, that when you think about it, you say, I wish I had some more measurements here, I wish this, I wish that. But you can go through and make the best of it you can. And geologists are well known for interpreting their data. So that's a big plus. And again, that's using that skill to go into other work areas. Positions for geologists, well, they do happen. I may say there's the baby boomers going through retiring, and so there
Mhm.
should be jobs. One important thing is when you're selling yourself to an industry, be confident of what you do, explain it clearly, trying to get to know these people. What do they want? What do you want? Um, it's to show you that you're not a highly trained specialist who's, that's what I do. It's best to be broader looking, best to be confident in what you do, um, and just keep a weather eye. I was advised not to go into geology. So I went to Canada and went into geology.
Of course. Yes.
It just happens. It's difficult to plan.
Yeah, I think we uh, we reflect a lot on that in our graduate student offices. But I try to say, if anyone's in a good position to try to be a geologist, it's us. So we might as well give it a shot and see what happens. So
Geologists in your heart.
yeah, exactly. Anytime anyone needs a rock identified,
Yeah,
I get a
that
phone
might
call.
that might sum it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what do you think students, young professionals, and early career scientists could be doing to improve their career prospects? This is another maybe fluid situation.
Well, I guess we've sort of covered that in many ways, but you, you'll be lucky to get the perfect job first time up. But don't be impatient. If you just take a 2 to 3 year view, say, okay, I'm going to work for this person. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. It will be experience. It will look good on your CV.
Hmm.
You know, yeah, that's about all I'll say, because it's totally in the lap of the gods, but it does happen, and generally quite frequently.
So this is, I think, an interesting question. In your opinion, has the geoscience industry changed over the years? And how do you see the geoscience industry and research evolving in the coming years?
I have worked for about 13 years through the university with a group
Hmm.
called ICPC, the International Cable Protection Committee. And it's been, to me, the most rewarding thing because I'm there as a scientist and I have good collaboration with this group of submarine cable engineers. They put the fiber optic cables under the ocean. There's about 1 million kilometers of them now, to transfer this call from you to me. Everything's fiber optics. It's absolutely staggering. And they're concerned about natural hazards and their impact on these submarine cables. That has led me into the realm of turbidity currents, submarine landslides, and gaining some knowledge of how these function, because that's one of the great geological problems, is how does the land connect with the deep sea and what's its impact on how the deep sea functions, because you're transferring carbon, nutrients, even temperature to the deep ocean via these turbidity currents.
Yeah.
That industry supports that work, which I'm sort of very grateful for, or the university is grateful for, I should say. And we've had permission from these guys to publish data, which allows us to see how the cables break under a landslide or under a series of turbidity currents. And it's become highly, what do they call it? It's critical infrastructure. If these cables break, people are left stranded. And it's happened 3 times in the past, in Algeria, in Taiwan, and off Newfoundland, when multiple cables have broken. I'm talking perhaps of 7 or 8 or 10 cables breaking. In the case of the Algerian one, Europe connection with the planet relied on one unbroken cable, the rest being broken by landslides generated by an earthquake. So that's been absolutely fruitful. We've got the data, and this is not new. It happened back in the 50s with Bruce Eason, looking at the Newfoundland earthquake of 1929, I think it is. And he got this data. Suddenly he was finding out, wow, these cables are breaking sequentially as you get into deeper water. In other words, the turbidity current was flowing down the continental slope, pinging cables as they went. And that was some of the very early direct evidence of how active or dynamic the deep ocean is. So we've been working on that. What we did do, and when I mean we, a group of us, we put together a report with the United Nations Environmental Programme. That was quite a major achievement. Again, the companies allowed us to use data, and it was like an ABC of what a submarine cable is, what it does, what the hazards are, and this sort of thing. And that was published in 2010, glossy publication, reasonably well written, well illustrated, and since 2010 it ticks over about 7,000 downloads per year. And so it may not be the numbers that you'd get with a pop star, but for that sort of topic, it has just informed Parliament or sort of governments. And so again, we followed hard data from the companies with the scientific input, taking it to the public, accessible understanding of it, and the concept. Oh, and one thing, it was freely available. It could be downloaded from the web. So that was a rather nice case of doing the science and taking it through to some conclusion, which in this case was valid outreach.
So does do the cable companies this kind of organization you have, is it multiple institutions and then this like a cable company, or is it just your institution and this cable company?
Well, there's it's with multiple. The ICPC, gosh, I can't remember, over 100 members from different companies. So there's a whole range of companies, and it's almost like airlines, that they're all separate entities. So if you fly United, it's a separate company, and these will be separate companies. Some make cables, some lay cables, some repair cables. And so in that context, the interaction between them are our competitors, but they get together under the ICPC to share information.
Okay.
It works very well. So yes, so when you have maybe some breaks off Florida happening now as we speak, I hope not, but there'll be a vessel going out there, pulling a cable up, repairing it, splicing the fiber optics together, laying it down the sea.
Yeah, I think, the internet has become so crucial. It's almost like the new kind of, when you used to go into the town square to talk to people. I mean, this has replaced the town square, and people really need it to be able to reach their community. So to not have that is, like you said, you're isolated, it's devastating. So I am interested, how do you think, especially considering the work that you do with these these multiple different industry reps, how do you think we can bridge the gap between academia and industry?
Communication, 2 levels. Industry showing what their requirements are, and that may be something as simple or complex as finding a new route for a cable, which is safer than other routes. The scientist has to be aware of those needs and work accordingly to do the good science in conjunction with the industry's needs, and just take it from there. What I've found with the years working with ICPC is that they have become, over that period, very much turned on by the science, and they're looking how to adapt those findings. For example, of Taiwan, off the top of the head, there's about there's at least 17 cables there. It connects Asia with the US, with other nations. So try finding out how that system has been affected, Taiwan being right in Typhoon Alley, how those things can be better protected. And that's led to a lot of science. Some of the science, most of the science has been funded by university or research centers, and the industry have supplied the information and bring those two together. It works, and so going back even further in time, one goes to Exxon, and that was a home of seismic stratigraphy.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
And when you look at micropaleontology, that came from the oil companies. So I think it's a healthy mix. I may say it's not going to be perfect all the time, but it's a healthy mix because they have lots of data. Right at the moment, they're providing data to the big mapping project, mapping the global ocean. So that extra bathymetric data is coming from industry, as well as universities and research centers. So it does work. It may take time, but I've found, in particularly cable people, because they have a history going back to Bruce Susan, their data is useful, and it does help both our knowledge of the deep ocean, but on places where to put safer routes for cables.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, before I looked at your research, I had no idea how involved geoscientists were in this kind of research. So I thought that was a nice thing to learn. So this is going to be the last question. So, and I think this is a really nice way to end. So, looking at the future trajectory of geoscience, what do you wish to get involved in, work on in the future?
I'm retired.
Oh,
No,
amazing.
that's a smart comment. Well, not too smart. I will continue on, and that's what I'm working on
Okay.
at the moment.
Okay.
So it's just in the blood. I just like what I'm doing. The originator of the award, Francis Parker Shepard, he died, I think, about when he was 85, doing field work on a beach.
No.
So it really gets, and I mean, he is considered one of the fathers of marine geology. And again, they had data sets which they could use from World War II, ships' bathymetric records, and start to get in their way to find out how the ocean functions. So, yeah, I just like what I'm doing. And a lot of other people do too. Not what I'm doing, but their own thing. They enjoy what they're doing.
And apparently a lot of people like what you're doing too. So,
Yeah, well, I'll talk to them.
well, congratulations. It's really nice talking to you and learning a little bit about what you do. And yeah, I'm sure we will meet again in the geology world. Uh,
Well, thank you very much. You've been a very attentive person listening to this.
thank you.
Okay.
No, I love talking. I think that's why the person that said I should do this suggested me. So it's all good.
And you're very good at it too.
Thanks. Well, thank you for taking the time to meet with me. I know it's late where you are, so I really appreciate just lining up our schedules. And yeah, I think I'll let you get on with your night.
We're going for a cup of coffee immediately.
Yes, that's what I was gonna do. Well, something like that.
Okay, nice talking to you.
It was nice to meet you, Lionel. Have a great night.
And you too.